It's time for the Full Press Hockey Podcast with Jim Biringer and Bruce Zeman.
Shoots! He scores!
And now, with a trip around the National Hockey League, here's Jim and Bruce.
Welcome back to the Full Press Hockey Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Biringer, credentialed media member, and alongside my legendary Hall of Fame broadcaster, Fox Media NHL analyst, Bruce Zeman. Bruce, always a pleasure.
Jim, great to be back with you. A busy time in the National Hockey League between NHL playoffs and coaching moves.
Yes, a lot of coaching moves to discuss, and I think that's where we're going to start. We usually save our Devils news for later in this segment, but I think that's where we got to start. Guys, don't forget to click that subscribe button on YouTube, Full Press Hockey Podcast on YouTube. Also, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. That's where we're going to start. New Jersey. That's where I am right now. You're not too far away from New Jersey now. But the New Jersey Devils have finally made a coaching hire, and it's the former Maple Leafs head coach, Sheldon Keefe. As reported, Monday night, there was a verbal agreement in place with Sheldon Keefe. They were ironing out the details, and from a source I spoke with today, Keefe basically put Tom Fitzgerald on the hot seat and said, the only way I'm taking this job is if you get me a goalie.
Well, I mean, he's 100% correct. And by the way, congratulations on breaking the story. You broke it. You had it first before anybody, and then everybody picked it up. So congrats on that. I mean, your sources are always right. So it's one of the reasons I do this with you, because you care about what you do, and your sources are accurate and you're right. So congrats on that, Jim. But it doesn't surprise me that whoever took that job put Tom Fitzgerald on the hot seat, and he should be on the hot seat, because although I was not a big Lindy Ruff fan, you and I have spoken about this on the podcast before. I personally do not believe he was given the tools to get past the point that he needed to. I think he misused some players, but whether it was Craig Berube, Jay Woodcroft, or as it is Sheldon Keefe, he needs a number one goalie, and now it is all on Tom Fitzgerald, as it should be.
Yeah, and this is a great hire by the Devils. Let's be honest. I think, of the guys out there, this guy, he has the best winning percentage, .622 over the last 5 years. Excuse me. He has a .622 winning percentage, best over the last 5 years. That's with Toronto. Being in the hockey hotbed that is Toronto, taking them to the playoffs. Yes, I understand they won one playoff round, but let's just dissect something for a minute. What he did with that Maple Leafs team, and the more I think about it and the more I look at the rosters, he did more with less, and he's going to have more in New Jersey.
He absolutely is. And again, since he told the GM that the only way he's taking this job is with a number one goalie, there's a few other things they need. They probably need another defenseman. I still think they need a physical presence. Personally, I'm hoping they go after Pat Maroon or Brendan Lemieux. We'll have to see. But I think you're 100% correct. I think he's got, a couple of all-world players. And, anybody in the Devils roster, they should be pissed off about the year that they had, because it was not a good year. And so you've got a new coach. You've got some players looking for redemption. And let's be honest, and I don't mean to call anybody out here, but the reason that Nico and Jack are paid millions of dollars is to deliver, and now they got to deliver.
Yeah, and I just want to get your thoughts on the hire of Keefe. I know you heard mine. I just want to hear what yours is.
Well, I think Fitzgerald was on the hot seat. I think they had to pick someone that could get them over the hump. The Devils do have a reputation for going cheap. We've talked about that multiple times, interviewing Gallant and Laviolette, and Peter Laviolette could very well win the Stanley Cup this year with the Rangers. And even if you're not a Rangers fan, you've got to admire what their front office has done. They've given him the tools. I thought personally it was going to come down. I thought it would have been Craig Berube, but when Keefe became available, I thought he might be the guy. And, there's a lot of other names out there, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. But, again, I think Keefe is going to be motivated to win after. And listen, you have to be honest, too. I mean, he was very graceful in the way he exited Toronto. He sent a nice message to the management and the fan base. One of the things that they always say is that your last interview is your first interview for your new employer. I thought it was incredibly classy. You nailed it right on the head as you usually do, Jimmy. Toronto is the hockey capital of the world. With apologies to Montreal, it's Toronto. And so I think you've got a very motivated head coach, and I think you've got a bunch of motivated players, and the expectations are going to be very high next season. I'll say that.
I agree with that 100%. And look, you and I documented this on the last podcast we did. Check it out, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Also wrote about it. And I quoted you in my article when we talked about this team being cheap on coaches. And they didn't pay Gallant. They didn't pay Laviolette. Well, this time they stepped up. They basically ripped apart the 2-year extension and gave Sheldon Keefe a 4-year deal with a pay raise. And that's what they needed to do. You have to step up and pay a coach. It's like paying a player. You need to improve your team. Your coach is going to get paid. This is the world we live in. You have to pay a coach. So they did. They have Keefe. Look, the Devils have a lot of talent. We've talked about it. Nico Hischier, Jack Hughes, Simone Nemec, Luke Hughes on the back end. You have Dougie Hamilton on the back end. Jesper Bratt up front. Timo Meier. This team is more dynamic, has more depth, and the roster is still not complete, but it's at a point where you could say this roster is built better than Toronto Maple Leafs. And look what Sheldon Keefe did with that team.
Yeah, and the one thing I was going to ask you that I have not heard about yet, have you heard if he's bringing any of his assistants with him to New Jersey, or I've heard nothing about that?
No, I haven't heard anything about that. I have yet to hear who the assistants are. I don't know anything about that yet. But I think, they have to get those guys right. I think you may have to bring in some former players that work for this team. Maybe you keep Sergei Brylin on. Maybe you bring in some guys. Again, we've been down this road. But again, a good hire for the New Jersey Devils. Hiring Sheldon Keefe. Again, we've talked about it. They interviewed McLennan, Berube, Woodcroft, a bunch of other names. But the Devils get their guy, and now the real work begins. And the real work is brought to you by Betalytics. Don't forget, check them out and get your gaming edge on. 25% off using the promo code FPH24. Log in monthly, yearly subscriptions. We've been hitting every night. We just hit again last night. Rangers and Panthers, Trocheck over totals, money line. Get those props in. We'll have more up today. But again, Betalytics.com. Go check those guys out. And that's where the real work begins, right? So now what are they going to do? Okay, what do they need? We know they need goaltending. We know they need defense, physical presence. We didn't really touch on the Curtis McDermott signing. We might have a little bit, but I'll bring this in. McDermott, 3-year deal at $1.5 million. I know the cap hit's not much, but I just don't feel like he's going to be there for 3 years.
Well, it depends what Keefe wants to do. I think Fitzgerald knows he needs a physical presence. I mean, the Bruins are done, and I've said this a couple of times now. I really liked when Pat Maroon was part of New Jersey. I thought that he brought an edge. I think he said that he wants to stay in Boston, but you know what? You never know. And I think besides bringing in another defenseman, I think the physical element is something, we talked about this last week. I mean, Tkachuk is not from the Panthers, is not from Ottawa, rather, is not coming to New Jersey. But again, some type of player with that type of sandpaper would definitely be on his wish list.
I mean, look, you look at the back end. Maybe you bring in a guy like Nikita Zadorov. You saw what he did with the Vancouver Canucks in 2 rounds of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Now we'll see what Vancouver does. Maybe they try to re-sign him. But I think that was a name the Devils were interested in when the trade talks began and when he became available back in November around Hockey Hall of Fame weekend. The Devils were definitely in on him. Maybe that's a play. But again, how long do you want to go with a guy? How much do you want to give him? Again, the priority is the goaltending. Now, Jacob Markstrom, is it UC Saros? Is it Linus Ullmark? And we'll touch on Ullmark in a little bit because I asked you to do some research on that when we get to our Bruins segment. But again, to me, I think they're going to re-engage with Markstrom and the Flames. I think Markstrom definitely wants to be a Devil. His mind was made up when things didn't go that way. Again, Saros is going to be the interesting one here because Barry Trotz has come out and said he wants to talk to him, see where he's at. They're going to try to talk, but he said in 4 to 5 years he doesn't want to be in this situation. They want to bring up Askarov. So you're looking at goaltending. If you really improve your defense, do you then go after a guy like Philip Gustafsson? But I still think this team needs a true number one goaltender.
I think you're 100% correct. And to take a step back to what we were just discussing a moment ago, for those that haven't played this game, hockey is a really emotional sport. I know Jimmy played forever. It's an emotional game. It's an intelligence game, but emotion is a big part of it. And just taking a step back to the Sheldon Keefe signing, I know he's going to do and he's going to say the right things, but that he wants to prove that the Maple Leafs are wrong. Okay.
Right.
So he's going to come in really motivated. Okay. And, Jack Hughes and Nico are going to be motivated because let's be honest, social media has not been kind to the team after the season that they had. But let's take a look at some of the goaltending that you talked about a few minutes ago. In 2 or 3 of those cases, first of all, Markstrom, I cannot imagine him coming back to Calgary. I don't know. And again, we don't know what was said. We don't know what went on in the room. That's important to know that because you don't know what goes on behind closed doors, okay? But you could clearly tell that he was not happy that they went to him. You're going to be traded, then it doesn't happen, okay? And then if you look at some of the other goalies, how does Ullmark feel? Being the guy winning the Vezina last year, and then he doesn't get a sniff, okay? And then you've also got UC Saros, who he wants to be the guy, and now they're talking maybe. So really, all 3 of these goalies who are really premier netminders, all of them, I think, are going to be tremendously motivated to come into a new team. And how do you think they're going to feel when you have an organization that says to them, because they're going to, listen, you're our guy for the next 4 or 5 years. You're the guy. You're the guy. You're not going to be looking over your shoulder. You're the guy.
Yeah.
And what goalie out of any of those 3 of them wouldn't want to play with like a Jack Hughes? I mean, with this team that they have, a lot of people, and again, you broke this again on your blogs and everything. A lot of people were saying that the New Jersey job was probably the most coveted one because it has the best roster right now. And so, kudos to Coach Berube for hopping on the bus in Toronto. But I'll tell you what, he's going to be on a hot seat quick up there if things don't, if they don't have a good start, because they're expecting big things, just like they are in New Jersey.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that they're going to be very motivated, whichever one of those 3 they go after. But again, I think it's important to remember, especially Devils fans, I'm talking as an analyst now, not as a fan, okay? It's going to cost you for one of these goalies.
It is, and I think you think about the players that were involved in the trade talks. Alexander Holtz, is it Dawson Mercer? Is it a Seamus Casey? First round picks in play. The Devils have the 10th overall pick in the 2024 NHL draft. You got to imagine that's in play. So you think to yourself, okay, so what else could they build around? Who can they go get? I would think it's Markstrom. I think it's Ullmark. I think Saros. I think guys like that. And we're going to see where that goes, because to me personally, I think Markstrom's a guy that you should bring in. Saros is a little younger. Maybe you get him to a 4 or 5 year deal. Pay him what he needs to get paid. If he wants Connor Hellebuck money, well, maybe you have to negotiate something with him there. Maybe get him in a $7 million range at a 4 or 5 year deal. I think that's pretty good. Again, Dawson Mercer needs a new deal. He's an RFA, but again, is he part of trade talks? Who do they want to give up? What are they going to have to give up? And again, you're going to have to pay something, like you have to pay with a coach. You have to give up something to get something. And we've seen teams do that at the trade deadline. We've seen teams do that in the summer. And now New Jersey's going to have to do it because they didn't do it last offseason. Everybody knows you need a goaltender. And not only do they need that, defense, maybe they need a scorer. Who are they going to add? There's a lot of work to do still for Tom Fitzgerald, but he got the coaching hire done.
Yeah, and kudos to him for making that happen. This is probably the biggest hire of his, GM ship, if you want to call it that. They really needed to get this right. And, I think they got the right guy for the team. And now, as you said, the work starts. And I just thinking, you and I were talking privately earlier this week, some of the stuff on some of the boards. I just hope fans understand you're not going to give up Dawson Mercer in a 5th round pick to get one of these goalies.
No.
It's going to cost you significantly. But I think if you go to any of these 3 guys who are all number ones. Well, let me throw this out there to you. If you had to rank those goalies, 1, 2, and 3, how do you rank them?
I'd probably go Markstrom, Saros, and Omar.
That's exactly what I would do. That's exactly how I would have them ranked. And I think if you go to that goalie and you say, look, you're our dude, you're our guy. Next 4 or 5 years, this is your team. Make it happen. Boy, they really could have a little mini dynasty there if they get things going.
Yeah, exactly.
They've got the talent. They've just got to, and if you look at what they've got to do, I think a lot of it hinges, and we haven't really talked about this at all, Jim. Is Dougie Hamilton going to be back to 100%? Is he going to be healthy come next year? Because that really hurt them this year.
It did. I mean, you could see it, especially on the power play. They didn't really have a shooter. He does so much more. Look, did he have a slow start to the year? Yeah. Was he getting exposed? Yeah. But what he brings to the power play, the shot, he can move guys. He can get the puck out there, maybe get another puck-moving defenseman to go along with him. That's why I was so shocked when you have $9.5 million and you didn't do anything to upgrade your D. You go get a Hannafin, you get somebody like that, just to help out. But again, maybe they saw this as a transition year. They saw last year's an overachievement. This is an underachievement. Maybe they're somewhere in the middle. Look, again, me personally, and I don't know what your thoughts on this is, but me personally, if I'm looking at this team, I'm saying to myself, maybe we need a number 2 center, and I'm going to move Jack Hughes to the wing because make him Patrick Kane because he can do all that stuff on the wing, or we got to figure out a way to teach him to play center because right now he can't do it and he's not built to play center in the National Hockey League.
No, he's really not. And you also have to hope that he stays healthy. He's been banged up the last couple of seasons, and surgery this year to end the year. You want to make sure that doesn't become kind of a common thing because both him and Nico have been banged up a lot in their first couple of years. I still think if you have a little bit, of a physical presence to kind of look after those guys, I think maybe that'll take some of the pressure off. But again, it's going to be very interesting to see what kind of lineups and lines that Sheldon Keefe comes up with because he was not afraid to move things around in Toronto when people weren't producing. So
no, he put John Tavares, the captain, on the third line.
Yeah. And that's maybe what needs to be done occasionally here.
I think so. I mean, a couple guys that come to mind real quick before we get to our Around the NHL segment, but a guy like Tyler Bertuzzi, a Max Domi, guys like that feel like, they played under Keefe. Maybe you get them to reasonable contracts. Those guys could help out, especially in your top 6.
Well, and Max Domi also brings some bite to the team also. That potentially could be a great addition. It's going to be really interesting. So if you think about what they've done so far, I mean, expectations are already risen in the past 24 hours for next season.
Right, they have. And think about this too. Like, I know everybody looks at Carolina, and maybe you get the White Whale and the Jake Getzel. Maybe you're able to get a guy like that. But you and I have watched this team throughout from a long time. This team had a lot of playmakers. This team has a lot of playmakers now. But when they were winning Stanley Cups, they had guys that could finish, and they paired those playmakers with goal scorers. I know Marty Nate is a great player, but I don't know if they need another guy like that on this team. They have too many playmakers and not enough goal scorers, and that's what their most important need up front is.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and if you look at the lines back during the Stanley Cup years, I mean, there was somebody on every line that was sort of a catalyst, and you had players that weren't afraid to score ugly goals. I mean, one of my favorite Devils of all time is Randy McKay, who could score from anywhere. He didn't care if it went off his backside, off his head. It was a goal. And, you had the whole crash line, Holik, McKay, and Peluso. That line was just like a cyclone were out there hitting everything, and they caused a lot of havoc.
Yeah, they did. I mean, you look back to the years they didn't win the Cup. I mean, you had Arnott, Elias, and Sikora together. McGillney was with Gomez. You threw Breland on that line. You could put Pandolfo with Madden. Like, McKay was with those guys, like Nemchinov, guys like that. That's what you have to do. And even the year they won in 03, right? You had Jeff Friesen on the line. You had guys that could bang around players. Turner Stevenson was hanging around. Like, They figured out a way to get stuff done. And I think that's what you have to look at now. It's like, okay, we have all these playmakers, but we don't have enough goal scorers. Maybe we need to go get a goal scorer. So Devils still have work to do.
They do, but the one thing that you mentioned when you were talking about 03, and this has kind of been a common theme for me this whole week watching New Jersey, everybody that they brought in so far, or that they're talking about bringing in, okay, with Keefe and maybe one of these goalies, back in 03, Jeff Friesen was very, very motivated to do something because of the way it had gone from him in some other places. I mean, if you bring in a Markstrom and you've got Keefe, and then you bring in somebody that, they're just not getting their opportunity, and you bring him to a team like New Jersey, and you just never know what's possible. You have somebody that has a career year.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, again, we saw that in 03. We've seen it other times. The guys come in and they're just super motivated to play. And I agree. I think this team's going to be motivated. And like you said, the expectations have risen. There were expectations last year. There's even more this year to get back to the playoffs. So we're going to see what the Devils do in the offseason. They hope to get to where the final four teams are as we transition to around the NHL. We're into the conference final. Game one of Dallas, Edmonton, Thursday night. We've had game one of Florida and New York Rangers Wednesday night. Florida up 1-0. Very dominating performance. Reminds me, and I put this out on my Twitter, at Jim Biringer. Go check it out. But everybody talks about, you and I have heard this growing up and throughout the years. Oh, neutral zone trap, boring, slows down the game, Why do teams play it? You know why teams still play it? A version of it? Because it wins. And that's all that matters come the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's all that matters. If I was on my other side of my room, you see the 3 Stanley Cup banners hanging up on my wall. The Devils won 3 Stanley Cups playing that way. That's why the Florida Panthers play it. That's why Tampa played it. Vegas. The list goes on of teams that have played it to a T, and they suffocated the New York Rangers in game one.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, and you're 100% correct. You and I have heard that for the last 20 years. Oh, the crap. You know what? And I'll never forget this. When I was, for folks that are tuning in maybe for the first time, I was the mascot for the New Jersey Devils for 3.5 years. I spent a long time in the organization and some great memories. I was at the Byrne Arena, or the Meadowlands Arena, I can't remember what it was called then, when Jacques Lemaire had one of his first press conferences in New Jersey. And one of the reporters asked him a question about if the players were going to adapt to the system that he was playing. And all he did was this, right? And everybody was like, why are you doing that? And he goes, because I have a ring for every finger.
Yeah.
And you know what? I still get that all the time. The Devil's in the trap. And I'm like, how many rings does you don't have? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But you see it, like Florida just suffocated the neutral zone. They just took away everything New York tried to do. Don't get me wrong. New York created chances after Matthew Tkachuk's goal went in, hit a couple of posts. And that's really how I have to break it, those quick transitional passes. But Florida feels like they're playing on another level. By the way, check this stat out. Going back, I did some research on this. Going back to 1996 conference final, game 7 against Pittsburgh, when they went to the Cup final for the first time before getting swept by Colorado. The Florida Panthers have now won 6 straight Eastern Conference final games. They won game 1 of this series, 4 last year, and game 7 in 96. They know how to get it done when it matters.
Yeah, and again, they're another team that's crazy motivated to make up for last year. And I watched a good part of that game, and you're 100% right. The Rangers are trying to break out, and you watch them come out of their zone. They're getting to neutral ice, and there's 4 Panthers there meeting them. They're getting nothing. And as you know, the way that they say that you should beat the trap is those quick transitional passes. The Rangers were actually trying to do that. They weren't doing anything wrong. It's just they'd make that pass, and all of a sudden, the player receiving the puck would have 3 Panthers on him.
Yeah, exactly. And not to take anything away from the goaltending either. Sergei Bobrovsky came up with some great saves, especially on the power play in the second period. Came up early on, and then the flurry when the Rangers, they had 1 shot in 16 minutes in the second period. They had a nice flurry to begin the third, and in the third, they had chances. The no goal goalie interference. They started to wake up a little bit, but Bob was right there. But again, Panthers in the lane, blocking shots, doing the little things, getting the puck out. That's their style, right? They're just mean, nasty. Paul Maurice said it after the game. That's how we play games. Matthew Tkachuk said after the game, we're here for wins. We don't care about individual achievements, right? Yeah, the dude's got 4 game-winning goals now in the conference final. All right, dating back to last year. Does he care? No, because they've won. But you look what the Panthers did. Guys in the lanes, just getting at things, pressure on the goaltender. Yeah, look, do you feel bad for Alexis Lafreniere? We've all been there with the own goals. Like, we've all been there. He did everything right. The puck just goes off his stick. And probably Shesterkin shouldn't come out of his net because he lost his net there. But, hey, smart on Verhaeghe. They say throw the puck on net, good things happen. You feel bad for him. But, look, I agree. Like Maurice said it, the Panthers are going to be better in game 2. The Rangers are going to be better in game 2. This feels like it's a 7-game series, but, man, the Florida Panthers are definitely a motivated team and understand that you need to learn to lose before you can win. And there's a reason why they won the Eastern Conference Championship last year.
Well, and if you look at how Tkachuk played last year, I mean, he had more injuries and I've been following this sport for 40-something years. I've never seen a player play with as many injuries as he did last year in the finals. He had like 6 different injuries.
Yeah, and he couldn't even move. I mean, maybe if he's healthy, maybe that's a different series. Maybe. I just don't think anybody was beating Vegas last year. They just so deep and so physical. And that's another thing, right? I heard this on the radio. I forget who it was. I believe it was Elliot Friedman. Yeah, it was Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet. He's on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. I want to credit that, right?
Good guy.
Yeah, very good guy. He said when Tampa was winning Stanley Cups, he said they just beat you down. Physically beat you up. And the Florida Panthers are doing the same thing. And I say go back to it. Blues did it. Bruins done it. Kings did it. Like, they beat you up. Checks matter. Winning ice battles, puck battles, board battles. They beat you up until you can't go no more. And that's what the Florida Panthers have done. They've taken the mantle away from the Tampa Bay Lightning. And we're going to see, we'll talk about Tampa after we get through this conference final stuff with Dallas and Edmonton because they made a nice trade the other day. But let me tell you something. Florida Panthers are the new kings in Florida right now of hockey.
Yeah, they absolutely are. And I agree with you. I think that's a 7-game series. And I'm curious to see what happens in game 2.
Me too. Do you think, I was going to throw this out, do you think we see Matt Rempe?
I'm not sure. But I would not be surprised in this series if you see Jonathan Quick.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. You never know, right? I mean, it's not like Shesterkin had a bad game.
He did not, but Quick has got a bunch of rings, and he's that veteran presence that they brought in to maybe settle things down. I'm not saying you're going to see him in game 2, but if the Rangers lose game 2, I would not be surprised if they put him in there because his experience, I mean, he has been a home run for the Rangers in every possible scenario, not only as a backup, but he's a good guy in the locker room. Everybody likes him. And
he was a motivated cat. Like, he was a motivated dude this year.
Absolutely. He had a great year. And again, how do you think it would make him feel to like come in and kind of right the ship for Shesterkin and kind of just give the guy a break if he's called on? I don't know if he will be, but that's why you have a veteran goaltender like that with hardware.
Yeah, exactly. So interested to see what happens, what adjustments are made for game 2, which goes Friday night, Madison Square Garden. Game 1, Western Conference Final in Big D in Dallas. Dallas Stars, Edmonton Oilers. Edmonton wins a game 7 against the Vancouver Canucks. And look, the Edmonton Oilers for about 50 minutes of that game dominated the game. It's 3-0. Vancouver can't generate anything. And then the final 10 minutes, they get some things going. But again, how often, and I bring this to the Rangers thing too, how often can you be the cardiac kids, the comeback kids? Because eventually it comes back and bites you in the butt, and it doesn't, you can't do it. And time and the hourglass ran out on the Vancouver Canucks in game 7 because they just started way too late.
Well, they were up 3-2 in the series, and I thought to myself, and I had said to you privately, that Vancouver needs to win game 6 because I didn't think they were going to win game 7. And it's the adage in any sport, the longer you let your opponent stick around, the more likely bad things are to happen. The Canucks got pounded in game 6, 5-1. They looked terrible. And then you're right. I mean, they played a much better game in game 7, but too little, too late. And, again, great season for Rick Tocchet and the Canucks. But again, to me, and maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. I just think this was a missed opportunity for Vancouver because I thought they should have tried. They did not play well in game 6 at all.
No, they did not.
when they lost that game, I didn't think there was any way they were winning Game 7.
And it doesn't help when Brock Vester's out of the lineup.
Right.
And all the best to him with the blood clots. I mean, that was announced, and that team was probably in shock. And then you have a 4-minute power play to begin Game 7, right, and you don't score, and the best scoring opportunity comes from Connor Brown shorthanded. Things aren't going your way. So the thing is though, I look at this series with Dallas, and you say to yourself, okay, Edmonton's been here before. They understand when they lost to Colorado, but Dallas is a deeper team. No rope hints for Game 1, but this team is deep. They're motivated by last year when they lost to Vegas. And Chris Tanev's going to be on the ice. He shut down Nathan McKinnon. He shut down Jack Eichel. His job's going to be shut down 97. And the Oilers, as good as they've been, as all the right buttons Chris Knoblauch has been pushing, goaltending matters, and I'm taking Jake Ottinger over Stuart Skinner.
That's a tough pick too. I was thinking about that before we went on today as to who I was going to pick in this series. Because the one thing that would concern me a little bit if I'm Dallas, and I do think there's a pretty good chance Dallas is going to win this series, but the only thing with Edmonton is, and it's been this way all year, you have Skinner, you have Picard, and Picard has come in and picked them up on a couple of occasions when they needed it. But I mean, Edmonton can win games 9-8. With Eichel and Draisaitl, and so that's the only thing that really counters potentially having a better goaltender in Ottinger. But man, that's going to be a great series.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great series too. Look, don't get me wrong. The Oilers' power play is still one of the best, still the best in the playoffs. Their penalty kill still, but they're not playing Vancouver and they're not playing LA, who don't generate shots on a power play. Like Dallas's power play is one of the best. They're one of the 4 teams remaining for a reason, right? They still have a good power play. They're going to shoot the puck more than Vancouver did, than LA did. But Stuart Skinner and that defense is going to be tested. Don't get me wrong. Chris Knoblauch, they were able to limit chances. They were able to limit shots. But Dallas just comes in waves. You got Tyler Seguin. He's been motivated. Jamie Benn, Logan Stankoven, Jason Robertson, Wyatt Johnston, Joe Pavelski starting to pick his game up, right? Radek Fox, Miro Heiskanen, right? And I know what Edmonton has with Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Hyman, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Vander Kane, Holloway, Evan Bouchard. But it just feels like Dallas is a deeper team. It feels like Dallas has gone through the battles a little bit more. Vegas, Colorado, you knock out 2 of the former champs from 2022 and 2023. You're here for a reason, got home ice. But again, what Oilers team shows up? Because we've seen the Oilers just rip off victories in the regular season. But the playoffs is a different animal. And if you're going to shut down, Draisaitl, McDavid, you're going to make the rest of the Oilers beat you.
Yeah, well, at the beginning of the year, I had Edmonton and New Jersey meeting in the Stanley Cup final. I had Edmonton winning. But looking at the 4 teams are left, I could pick, and I bet you could as well, I could pick any of the 4 teams that are left to win and give you a number of reasons why. I just am wondering if either of these Western teams can beat the winner of the Eastern Conference teams. And I say that because Florida is like a buzzsaw.
Yeah, they are.
Right? And the Rangers, just because of if you put Rempe in there and you get, we didn't even talk about this. Blake Wheeler is healthy now, and
he's not playing in the series.
No,
he's too slow. Not. He's too slow, and I don't know if he's going to be able to keep up with the Florida Panthers.
Well, I don't know if anybody can beat the Florida Panthers. So we'll see. Again, both of these series, I have pick them.
I really do too. I think their pick 'em series, I would give slight edges to Florida and Dallas, but you can see anybody winning. And look, Edmonton, they have the skill. Let's see if their defense and goaltending holds up, because we know Dallas is because of Chris Tanev and Heiskanen and Essen Lindell. So it's I can't wait for the series. Actually, I'm really looking forward to the Western Conference Final.
Yeah, I have Florida and Dallas as well. The only little asterisk I have next to this is, Connor McDavid and Draisaitl are both capable of scoring 5 or 6 points a game, and at this time of the year, goaltending is crucial. But if you win 4 of those 7 games and you give up 30 goals and you score 40,
you're winning.
Who cares?
Yeah, exactly. And we haven't seen the best of Connor McDavid yet either.
And he is certainly going to be motivated at this point as well. So, Boy,
Should be a fun one. Should be a fun one.
Should be a fun one. And there's already talk about the Conn Smythe Trophy and who could win it from either team.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I'm glad I don't have to pick that.
No, not right now. Exactly. So conference finals continue. Some news and notes around the league. Obviously, the big trade Tuesday before everything got done. Ryan McDonough goes back to the Tampa Bay Lightning from the Nashville Predators. Barry Trotz does right by him. They talked in exit interviews, and he said that McDonough asked if he could get traded back to Tampa, if it was something that could happen. They get on the phone, they take care of business. But here's the caveat. Like, Tampa only has $5 million on the salary cap. They're taking on the entire salary of Ryan McDonough, 6.75. Look, and the reason the Preds did it is because they have the buyouts kicking in and the retention of several players that total like $12 million. But Steven Stamkos needs a new deal. Victor Hedman's eligible for an extension. Somebody's got to go here that is making some money, because they still need to sign a couple of more guys, and they need to sign the captain. And it sounds like this dude's like wants to be there because McDonough's back. So these guys are all happy. So it seems like they're doing things the right way to keep this window open and maybe try to win one more Stanley Cup. Because like I said before, McDonough was the backbone of that defense. You could tell the defense wasn't the same when he wasn't there. Too much stuff in the middle, wide open, and he blocks a lot of shots, and he understands how to win. What a trade. I like it for both teams.
It is good. And kudos to Nashville for doing the right thing, sending him back home, and kudos to Tampa Bay for bringing him back. And again, with the Stamkos thing, I don't know. He's won a couple of cups. To me, I don't think you're going to get him for a huge hometown discount, but how much do you need at this point in your career? How much do you need?
Well, they got $5 million left to spend unless somebody else goes out. Could it be Hago, Cirelli, Nick Paul, guys like that? We're going to see what Tampa does, but that's like the big news story there. A couple coaching things I've heard now. Marco Sturm and the San Jose Sharks. Obviously, they finally got permission to do that. To talk. I would not be surprised if Sturm is named the guy in San Jose for what he's done, his resume. He's a Shark. So that makes sense to me. And then up in Seattle, either Dan Bilesmore or maybe Dean Evison could be, filling out things. And obviously Jim Hiller was named the full-time coach now in LA. So we're going to see what happens there.
Yeah, and a couple of not many coaching moves left.
No,
and again, finally, our team finally announces who they're going to make, and I'm glad who they have, and I'm glad who they did not hire.
Right, exactly. So as we wrap up, we're going to go look at the Boston Bruins, and we mentioned Linus Ullmark before, and that's a goalie that the Devils have been linked to, and he has a no trade clause, and one of the teams was LA, and he vetoed a trade it at the deadline because he talked about he wanted to be in Boston, finish the job, and he even made some comments at the Bruins media day where he said, look, I got one more year left here. It's going to be an interesting summer. He understands the trade rumors. He understands, but he has control. And one of the things I asked you was New Jersey on his no trade list?
I was not able to find that out. However, what I did find out is that he was really not looking to go anywhere this past season because of stuff with his family. He really wanted to see if he could finish it out in Boston. I think, and I may be reading between the lines here, but what I kind of took away from the folks I talked to is that a lot of the Bruins were pretty bitter about the way things ended last year. They wanted to see if they could kind of right the ship this year. I mean, unfortunately, it didn't happen. But I think now that they to use a phrase, they gave it another shot, and they'll see. I think from what I was able to get, I know he wants to win, and I think that if he were to go to a team like New Jersey, I'm just using that as an example, I think he's looking for a team to make a long-term commitment to him where he's the guy. Because one of the things I will tell you, and you know this, Jimmy, is that it's very rare for goaltenders to have a relationship like Swayman and Ullmark have. I mean, yeah, you root for each other, but it seems that those guys genuinely liked each other. They genuinely cared, and they both wanted to win, and that's fantastic. But if we're being honest, it doesn't usually work out that way. It's usually some kind of rivalry, and so it's hard to build that camaraderie, because I think whatever team Ullmark goes to, I think, and you can't blame him. I mean, he wants to be the guy.
Yeah, he does. And look, Swayman's going to get paid this summer. We know he's going to get 7-8 sheets, probably over a 6-7 year deal in Boston. And you can't have $12 million tied up in goaltending, especially when you have $22 million to spend right now. So, maybe they let it play out, but I feel like Omar's time in Boston is done. But again, he controls where he wants to go, if he wants to go, where he wants to go. They have a lot of free agents. You mentioned Pat Maroon. He wants to stay. Jake DeBrusk is another name that, is out there. He was hoping to have a contract extension right now. But I think the Bruins are going to move on from him. I really do.
Well, he made some comments earlier this week about being surprised that he didn't have a contract. That I don't know about you, but that to me is just kind of a weird situation. He always seems to be the player that either gets forgotten about or they're just, I don't know if it's a cloud. There just seems to be something going on with the way they treat him.
Yeah, I mean, he feels like a prototypical Bruin, but I think his inconsistent play is factoring into why he may not have a contract right now, because he's great for some games and stretches, but then he disappears.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not talking about this year, but last year, they had a whole bunch of issues with him getting in the lineup, and they were scratching him. And from what I had been told is they weren't really telling him why, and there were all these other things. And that's hard. That plays, that's hard on a player's psyche to, am I playing? Am I not playing? And then you'd play for 3 games. And so I agree with you. I think if you don't hear something in the next week or something, I think he may be on the move.
Right. And then obviously their rivals, Montreal Canadiens, I feel like they're going to be active at the draft. They have the 5th overall pick. They are not afraid to make moves at the draft. They brought in Alex Newhook, Kirby Dach. Obviously the rumors are out there with Trevor Zegras. Again, could they bring him in because he's available in Anaheim? I definitely think it's, we talk about New Jersey expectations. I think the expectations now for the Montreal Canadiens is to compete for a playoff spot. I'm not saying make the playoffs, but Jeff Gordon, what he's building there with Kent Hughes. Kent Hughes said the pick could be in play. I think that team's going to be very active this summer.
Yeah, and I had heard that from a couple of people that the Canadiens were going to be very active. And actually, there was some rumors early this week about the Calgary Flames talking to the Canadiens about a couple of players, and they said no. So I don't know if it's that they don't want to deal with another Canadian rival or there just wasn't something they were interested in. But I think you're right. I think that Montreal has probably got another year under St. Louis to develop, and then maybe next year the expectations will be to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree with that. So lots of things going on in the National Hockey League, from the New Jersey Devils hiring a head coach, conference finals, some coaching news, and obviously the rumors are going to pick up as we head towards the NHL draft next month at the Sphere and free agency on July 1. But this has been another episode of the Full Press Hockey Podcast. I've been your host, Jim Beringer. My co-host, Hall of Fame broadcaster, Vox Media NHL analyst, Bruce Zeman. Bruce, always a pleasure to do the show with you, buddy.
James. Wow. Thank you for having me on the show again. And you and I will talk again next week.
Absolutely, guys. Don't forget to subscribe. YouTube channel, Full Press Hockey Podcast. Get this iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Again, don't forget, check out betalytics.com, FPH24, promo code 25% off. Monthly, yearly subscriptions. Play along. We've been hitting big. So, guys, check it out. Go there. Check us out on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, and enjoy the Stanley Cup playoffs. We'll be back again next week.
Barry Trotz, Nashville Predators, making sure you're listening to Full Press Hockey Podcast.